Oh, hey. So we just got back from, I guess we got back 2 days. One day ago. Feels like I've been home for a couple of days for some reason.
Really?
Yeah. So, so we got home yesterday, but we left Ottawa, Ontario. We bought new motorcycles, new to us. Bought new motorcycles and drove here to Nova Scotia where we live. And it's about, I think, just what we drove would probably come in around the 1,500 kilometer range.
I believe so.
Somewhere in that range.
Just under.
Because the first day was like 650, and then the second day was 550, 560, somewhere in there. And then the third day would have been 200 and change. So yeah, so it puts us around 1,400, 1,500 kilometers, somewhere in that range. My intent was, of course, to shoot three vlog videos. I was going to shoot day 1, day 2, day 3, and I get cameras ready. I could charge them, etc., etc. But I pretty much shot when we left, and then I pretty much shot on the last day because we just got drenched. We got rained on for pretty much 2 solid days. And not only was it
just the rain.
No, and that we were talking. I'm like, riding in the rain is okay.
It can be tolerable.
Tolerable. Riding in the cold can be tolerable.
Yes.
But when you mix the two together, and then throw in pretty strong wind. Like it was pretty strong wind. It was just like the bikes were constantly like you were just constantly just shifting. I was going around corners and stuff like that, and I was just like, I can't hold.
No, that's what I kept thinking. Like, have I forgotten how to ride?
I can't hold a solid line across things. It was just you'd float, you'd come in and back out, and I'm like, what is going on?
I thought I forgot how to ride.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I think it's the wind. And we went and picked up new bikes, so of course we haven't had a chance to get the bikes customized to ourselves at all. And I was telling Mary when I got home, because I've already bought something for my motorcycle, is that the person that I bought it from, of course, was just not a lot shorter than me, but a little bit shorter than me. And because of that, he probably had it set really good for him. But I was getting just crazy like wind buffeting off the top of my helmet. So my helmet for like 2.5 days was just vibrating because of that constant just hitting with all the wind and all that kind of stuff. So I think we learned, maybe we learned, some things that we would definitely do maybe differently if we were to do it again. First thing would be is we would just go get a trailer and just trailer the bikes.
Honestly.
Well, it's funny because leading up to our little trip, I was watching all kinds of videos in regards to people doing long distance riding and what you needed to do and blah, 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 blah. But one of the things nobody talks about is, you go on a long distance trip, and that's great. Drink lots of fluid, make sure you do the majority of your riding early on in the day, because that's when you're most aware or awake, or the most, you're mentally there the most. Make sure you get good rest. But nobody talks about what happens when you experience like days of wet and cold, because relentless.
I just kept like screaming, just stop, please.
Yeah.
Stop.
I'm probably like, there were sections of our ride that like it was raining pretty good.
Yes.
And in Celsius, they were saying it's like 3 or 4 degrees. Like that's just above freezing. I had thoughts in my head. I was just like, if it hits like 0, like it's how
We're gonna hit snow.
we're gonna hit snow, or with all this water, like what happens if the road starts to freeze up on us? You know, that's probably not very good for us to ride on.
No, I kept thinking that too. I'm like, we've got to be close to this becoming ice or snow.
Yeah,
it's so cold.
It's so cold. So here's probably my thought. You know, we always hear about, you know, wear your gear, wear for the what is it? Ride for the no, wear for the ride, the slide, not the ride. For gear. I don't remember. It's
prepare for the slide.
Prepare for the slide, not the ride.
Yeah,
right. So wear
like
gear.
that.
But and that's great. But I'm still not coping with it well. But you have to prepare. I think the biggest thing is preparing for weather. Like we were in Ottawa, and like the whole week up to the day, day we were leaving was like no rain, and you should have, 16 to 19 degrees.
Yeah, or maybe like a possibility of a shower here or there.
Yeah,
but
little drizzle.
We may miss it based on our timing.
And then the night before, it was just like, no, you're going to hit +5, maybe, and it's going to be torrential rain for all of it.
Yeah, the feels like temperature was 1.
Yeah.
For a big
feels
chunk
like
of,
1
of Sunday.
And I think the feels like when you are in soppy wet clothes felt way colder, because the feels like on a motorcycle, usually you take 5 to 10 degrees off because of the wind chill, because you're moving through it. So the biggest thing I know for me, number one, and for you probably, was our hands. So if you're riding or going on a long distance ride or doing anything like this, number one is get the little, what do they call those little rubber gloves that we had? Almost like the surgeon gloves. Little rubber gloves, little latex gloves, just to have underneath your actual gloves, because your gloves will get wet. But then at least you have the latex gloves to keep your hands drier.
Dry.
Cold, but dry at least. So if they were wet, they'd be colder.
Yeah,
I would
and then
think.
You just would get really uncomfortable with wet fingers.
But I think the biggest thing is, like I keep saying the biggest thing, but I think we had to stop on day 2 because none of us had dry gloves. We brought a whole bunch of pairs. They were all soaking wet. Sadly, the hotel that we ended up staying in, the heat was fine as far as a person in the room, but we couldn't crank up the heat anywhere to dry any of our stuff. And if you went out and asked them if we could use a dryer.
Clothes dryers, then no.
No, we only, of course, they have a dryer for their linens, but they wouldn't let us use it. So we started day 2 with nice wet gloves, and like my boots were not wet, but they were damp. So we ended up going to Canadian Tire on day 2, about 2 hours in, probably?
Yeah, 2 hours.
About 2 hours in, and we bought all kinds of just leather gloves, like in the work area, I guess, work gloves. Something that looked that at least that it would protect our hands a little bit.
And be, kind of thick.
Kind of thick, dry at least. They were dry.
They were dry for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, but they started dry.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, if I was going on a long distance ride, even by myself, I would have 4 to 6 pairs of gloves, depending on the length of time you were going.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, see, I had my leather gloves and a pair of my mesh gloves that are my favorite gloves for riding.
Those never came out of the bag.
No, but I was like, that'll be good, because if it's a little cooler, like it's 16, 15, then the leather gloves, but otherwise the mesh gloves. But the leather gloves were horrible after they got wet.
Yep.
And, I didn't.
Well, I bought a pair of, they're just like titers, same kind of thing, like probably a little bit more than mesh gloves that I wore, and I brought a pair of like cold weather riding gloves, but I ended up letting you wear them because I knew you were suffering. So I let Mary wear them, and I just kept wearing the other ones because I was able to deal a little bit more with the cold better.
Yeah, I wasn't coping at all.
No, there was definitely some moments that all coping was gone.
I broke down completely.
Yeah.
Like, I spent about a half an hour crying on the bike while riding because I just couldn't. I couldn't not.
Right, it was the only thing that
We
was
arrived
functioning.
at the stop. Was it the first day?
It was the first day.
Yeah, so the
You
first day-
broke down both days.
I did. So the
Yeah.
first day wasn't as bad. We arrived at a stop, and I was trying to hold it together. But as soon as I stopped and pulled up to the pump, and I could barely pull the clutch in and the brake in because my hands hurt so bad. Greg's on the comms and he says, "Do you need gas?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah, there was
"Are
just
you
a sound.
okay?"
There's like a sound that came out.
He said, "Are you okay?" And I just started bawling. I said, "No." And then so he rushed over and was like, "Just go inside. I'll put the gas in, park the bike, so you just go start getting warm." And it was a good 20 minutes before I stopped shuddering.
Oh, but like I did all that with the bikes, put them away and parked them and both bikes and everything and went in, and you were still like shaking, right?
I took all the wet stuff off, but
Yeah.
and of course restaurants are all geared for summer, so it's cold air blowing. There's no heat inside, so to try to get warm was challenging. So I had coffee, and I tried to warm up from the inside. I had some food.
Yeah, a lot of times we would just order coffee and not even drink it just to have
just
the
wanted
heat.
to hold it.
Yeah, just to have something in your hands.
But then the next day, there just was a section where the rain was just relentless and just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and was so cold that I broke down again, and I cried for about a half an hour on the bike, screaming at the rain to stop and saying, "I hate this so much."
And then envying every car that drove by.
Yeah, and then we stopped again, and I had to go in and warm up, and Greg filled up the bikes again.
Did it again,
Because I just couldn't.
There's no functioning anymore.
No, and I've never felt like that. I mean, we've ridden through some pretty rough stuff before, but I don't know if it's because we haven't ridden much lately.
But we've ridden through rough stuff, but we've never ridden through rough stuff at that temperature.
Yeah, I guess that's probably it.
Right? Like we've ridden in the rain, but it's been like really bad rain. But it's been plus 10, plus 15. Or more. Yeah. But plus 2 and 3, and you're wet all the time and cold. Yes. There's just no saving.
It just hurt.
It just hurt.
It hurt so much.
And because of our, I want to say, some of our, it's poor planning when you look back at it. Back then, it didn't seem like poor planning, because even like yourself, right? Like I brought my full face helmet. That was my choice because I was like, I know it's going to keep me warm, and I know if I only have one helmet, that's the best one to bring. Mary brought a 3/4 helmet.
Which all I was thinking was, if it's a little cooler, I wasn't thinking rain at all, but I was thinking if it's a little cooler, I'll be okay with my 3/4. I'll just put a buff on.
And yeah, and your visor comes, like you have the glasses, like the sunglass or the tint shield that comes halfway down. So yeah, the buffs and that, you would get fairly decent wind protection.
Yeah, like it's a good helmet that I've worn through lots of weather, but
not a good helmet.
The worst choice of helmet I could have brought. For one, it didn't have any face protection. My other 3/4 has a clear visor that comes down all the way.
Yeah, all the way down
to your. So much nicer. So the rain hitting my face, it hurt. It felt like needles being fired at me. Like it was really hard. Also, then the buffs got soaked with water, and I felt like I was being waterboarded because I'd breathe in and it would just be water. And then the visor was tinted, so it was dark and cloudy, And so I couldn't see. Plus, rain, it's not helpful no matter what kind of helmet you're wearing. No. But then when it's dark, I was just like, but we had to go, and I had no choice.
No choice. So on day two,
let's go buy a helmet.
Yeah, day two, when we went to go buy our gloves, we decided we're at Canadian Tire because it's still fairly early. It was like, what, 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that?
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm like, let's go we'll go buy a full face helmet, and we'll take your existing helmet and I can just bungee it to the back of the motorcycle. So that's what we did, and I think that helped.
It definitely helped. It still was, my body was fine.
Mine too.
For the most part, my legs were pretty good. My feet got a little wet, but actually not bad. But it's my hands.
Yeah.
That really was where
But I do think if you can keep your body's probably, every one of us that goes for a ride or long distance rides, you're going to have a whole bunch of shirts, and you're going to have a whole bunch of socks, and you're going to have, hopefully rain gear. So I was wearing like 3 or 4 t-shirts on top of each other, and my jacket, and a rain jacket, and a vest.
Yeah.
And so my body was decent. I can't say I was cold. I wasn't. I'd love to have been a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
But I was okay.
Yeah.
Same with my legs. My legs, wearing my pants and the rain pants, because then you got that wind protection and stuff that was helping this part of you stay warm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the worst part, like you said, is just your hands. There's just no way to, when it's raining and cold, for them not. Nobody makes an actual true, that I know of, a true, real to life waterproof glove.
No.
Like, they just don't make them, so
if
it was
somebody
horrible.
does, please send them our way.
Yeah, leave it in a comment. I'd be more than happy to try that out. I think so. Outside of the fact that we were frozen and wet, I think the other thing to just like, if you're doing like a long distance ride, and it's not. I don't think one or the other is the best way. You kind of have to figure it out. We had pre-booked everything. So we booked a hotel for day 1, we booked a hotel for day 2, and we booked a ferry for day 3. And the ferry was taking us to Nova Scotia. So with this kind of weather, of course, everything was booked and everything was bought and paid for. And we're at the point now where you can't be refunded. So there was no stopping, right? So normally that's what you want, right? Because I know at least on the second hotel, there was no vacancies. So if we would have pulled in there and been like, well, now what? We don't have a place to stay.
Exactly.
Right? So I always like pre-booking. And I think if you're going to do this, it's one of those things that you have to kind of just be aware. If you get caught in this kind of weather, you need to be able to get through it. Mm-hmm. Or if you don't know if you have that ability, because some people can't, right? If they were to get to rain, especially if they're new to it,
yeah,
they may not be able to ride that kind of distance, and you may really want that ability to opt out and just be like, I'm done now. Find me whatever. Like, find me a motel as close as possible to here.
Yeah.
And if it takes me an extra day or 2 to get home, that's fine. So, we had 3 days. It took 3 days. If I were to do it again, I would love to have been able to do it at a time that Mary didn't have to be at work the next day, so that if for whatever reason we wanted to, we would have had that flexibility to stay somewhere.
Yeah.
Just to extend the trip because we needed to.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of my biggest concerns, is what happens if, like we were talking about, what happens if it got icy? Now what? Mary has to be at work.
Well,
Well, no, I get it, but still, you get that thought in your head, what if it becomes dangerous? Yeah. So there's just a lot of that, I think, that you want to think about before you do a long distance ride. Yeah. And it's not really just what gear do you take and how much fluid do you drink and how much that's stuff
important.
that's important for sure, but that a lot of that is based on your weather being really good.
Yeah,
Right.
Like the weather doesn't even really factor into those plans.
Well, it does, like dehydration. Because if you looked at the other side too, like I've had friends of mine that have had a friend of mine ride out west, and he was like, it was 38 degrees every day. That's also an issue, right? That's
For sure.
where you're playing on the other side, where you want to make sure that you have enough gear or enough storage on your bike to store all the gear that you need to take off,
Yeah.
right? And that you're carrying enough fluid with you, because you totally forget to drink all the time.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, we made it home safe and sound. If you guys are going on a long distance ride, I think the biggest thing is just to always think about not what the weather looks like in the 7-day forecast, but think about what the weather could actually become.
Prepare for everything.
Yeah, prepare for the worst, because if you're not prepared for the worst and the worst happens, you could be in for a miserable adventure.
Yeah.
It's a great story now, but I'd prefer not to have the story.
I'd rather be saying like, "Oh, that was such a beautiful ride.
Yeah.
I had such a good time."
Yeah, but no.
But at the end of the day, even though it was tough until like we did it.
We did it. We're home. Sore. Super sore.
And my hands are still
Yeah,
sore.
yeah. For me, it's my upper back and my shoulders. Yeah.
So not too bad.
Right. All right, guys. If you guys have done long distance trips on your motorcycle in horrific weather, and I don't know what's going on with this light, but leave comments below, and that's it. We'll see you next video. Later. And it's raining, and we've been standing out in the rain, and that's awesome. Super excited about it. More excited to get back on this, I guess.